Hi guys, my name is Jason. I'm a self-taught web developer who wanted to learn full stack web development on his own, and after years of trying and just continuously hitting walls, I realized that I probably needed to go to a boot camp. So after researching a bunch of boot camps, I decided to go to Flatiron School here in New York. This channel is going to document my journey from weeks 1 to 15 on a weekly basis on my experience at Flatiron. So guys, this is my week 7 review of the Flatiron School. This is my first week in Mod 3. Got a close call getting out of Mod 2, but we made it. And in this video, I'm going to talk about my first week in Mod 3. I'm also going to talk about one of my biggest regrets as a aspiring web developer, period. And I'm going to give you some advice so that you can kind of avoid those pitfalls. And I was reminded of this regret, or I started to have this regret when I entered Mod 3. So let's get into it. So my first week of Mod 3. Mod 3 is where we do some front-end web development, and we are introduced, or in my case, reintroduced to JavaScript. I took my prep work and I did my code challenge in JavaScript. But when you start off in Flatiron School, you're going to start off with Ruby as your functional programming language. So we got back into JavaScript. We got into DOM manipulation. DOM is the document object model, which is basically the HTML and CSS that you see when your screen comes on, whether you're on your phone or on your computer, laptop, or whatever. So what we do in Mod 3, we're going to do a lot of front-end development, which means the stuff that you see. The average user sees the front end of web development. That's where you have the UI, which is the user interface, right? How you move around a website, where your fields are, where your buttons are, and that all encompasses the UX, which is the user experience, right? X is not really experience, but you see how it sounds kind of intuitive, right? So anyway, in Mod 3, we're going to do DOM manipulation with the JavaScript. And that leads me to my regret. Well, let me get into my first regret as a web developer. Me, as maybe a lot of you have experienced, when you get into web development, or you want to get into web development, or you just get curious about coding, the kind of wide, general, and really typical suggestion is you start with CSS and HTML, right? That's the things you can see. It's a little bit easier to kind of get the weird syntax of how that whole world works. So naturally, you're kind of suggested, or people will advise you to start there. My first piece of advice, I started with HTML, I started with CSS. Don't take too much time on HTML and CSS. I probably spent probably the first six, 7 months doing HTML and CSS. And my regret in doing that is I probably wish I had jumped into JavaScript or any kind of functional language sooner. HTML, CSS, depending on your proficiency and your kind of affinity for those things, you could probably learn those in about a year, probably about a week a piece. So if you took 1 week and you just said, okay, I'm going to just focus on HTML, I'm going to give myself probably 20, 30 hours of HTML. You can learn HTML enough to be very familiar with it. The same thing with CSS. What you want to do if you're going to get into either front-end web development deeply, or especially back-end, learn a functional language as early as you can. That was my biggest regret. My first functional language, or the functional language that I started with, was JavaScript. But I started JavaScript probably a year and some change into my web development journey. So again, if you're going to get into web development and you think you're going to have some interaction with the back end, if you think you're going to have any interaction with changing things that people see on a website or an application as they're using it, learn JavaScript. Spend a lot of time in any kind of functional language, but learn the language, right? Learn the functional language. Start off with that as soon as you can. my second piece of advice is, if you're going to learn JavaScript, which is what the web and what Google and any browser really uses to change the page as you interact with it, learn JavaScript within the DOM, right? Learn JavaScript within the document object model. What does that mean? That means learn how to use your variables, your functions, your data type, right? Build your fizzbuzz function, right? That spits out your fizzbuzz and counts up and down and all those things. Learn about objects, learn about object properties. Learn your basics of JavaScript. But when you actually want to practice JavaScript, once you get functions and returns and all those different things down pat, go to the DOM and play with JavaScript within the DOM, meaning use JavaScript to change the way websites and your web page looks. Do that as soon as possible, because I'm learning in Mod 3 all the JavaScript that I know. I'm familiar with the syntax. I'm familiar with the curly braces. I'm familiar with returning things to get the value out of them. I was familiar with all that. But jumping into manipulating the DOM with JavaScript, which we've done this week, has been something that has been a little bit overwhelming, as all week ones are, but it just made me think back on my JavaScript experience, and I was like, man, if I just, taken my JavaScript from the basics to the DOM, I'd probably be a lot more proficient with it and a lot more comfortable this week. You can see, if you Google a lot of JavaScript stuff, MDN gives you the JavaScript in a bunch of different contexts, whether you're putting it in a script in HTML, right in the document, whether you're using it in an external JavaScript file. It gives you all the syntax for those different things. If you go to W3 Schools and you look at JavaScript, a lot of it is done in the DOM. You're going to see a lot of document.write, and you're going to manipulate the DOM. For me, for a while, I was a little intimidated by that. I'd rather use JavaScript like in some kind of runtime environment where I could just kind of get the things to spit out that I wanted to. And I really shied away from the way W3 Schools kind of teaches you JavaScript, but that is a powerful way. So again, go to W3 Schools, look at their JavaScript documentation, try their models, model your JavaScript after that, because it's going to be immensely useful. So that's what we did this week. We built a few models where we were liking things. We combined that with not only changing what we see on the page, right? Liking a picture, the blank heart will go to a red filled heart. We did stuff like that. We actually also combined that with persistence, which is when you post a photo and someone likes your photos, right? And you close your Instagram account and you had 100 likes and you go back and now you have 103 likes, or the likes that you had before you closed on the app, they didn't just magically disappear. They had to be saved, or they had to persist on some kind of database. So we also dealt with saving information, whether it's a post, a like, whatever information or whatever data types that the user actually updated their account with, updated their app or whatever. They posted a picture and added a comment. We also saved that information in the back in the database, which was basically a JSON file, which is a different type of format. But this week went really fast. Learned a lot of stuff. I gotta say that I'm really feeling like a web developer, to be honest with you. There's times where you do web development, you learn different things, and you're not really putting things together. And I started to slowly feel like I was becoming a web developer when we were building apps and Mod 1 and 2, and especially at the end of Mod 2, where we did authentication, where we put the sign in feature, where you would have to sign in to get into your account, and then play with the app from there. I started to feel more like a web developer versus somebody just playing around with these different functional languages. But now I feel even more like a developer, manipulating the DOM and playing with single page applications where the page doesn't have to refresh. and everything that you do, any interaction you have is immediately updated right in front of you, again, without the page having to update. So I'm feeling really good about this week that passed. Moving to mod 3 was this is around the halfway point of the program. I finished week 7. The program is 15 weeks, so I'm going into week 8, so a little bit more than halfway through. Yeah, it's going pretty good. Any questions you have, leave in the comment section. It was a pretty good week overall. The instructors are awesome. We got a new instructor this week. He's awesome. So you're probably gonna have probably 2 instructors, one for every module. But again, our TAs are great. I'm sorry guys for calling you guys TAs. You guys are SCCs, or I always forget the acronym, but they're basically very extremely smart, very helpful guys that help us along, and gals. We have some ladies there that are brilliant also, and they help us out. And yeah, so week 7 was great. I look forward to week 8. We take a code challenge at the end of this week, so I'll definitely check in to let y'all know how that goes. But any more questions on Flatiron School, please leave them in the comments. Anything you like to hear more about, less about, if I'm being too general, being too specific, whatever you want to hear, leave it in the comment section. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I see you guys at the end of next week for week 8's review of Flatiron School. Have a good one.